So we're here on April 23rd, 2025, in the home of Susan Hanas, who graciously allowed us in to talk about the early parts of Oviedo. Not that she was there, but that her family was there, and then what she has done in her career and lifetime being here. So thank you again for being here.
You're welcome.
And the first is, tell me about how and when your family came to Slavia, Oviedo area.
Okay, my grandfather left what then was Czechoslovakia, which is actually his family now is on the Slovakia side instead of the Czech side of those two countries. And he came in 1909, left all the family there. My grandmother worked in the kitchen of the Duke, made his coffee all the time, and she was a seamstress. And so she had 4 children, and he sent home money, and she decided finally that she had enough. And in 1912, she and the children and a brother of my grandfather came over on a ship, got off in New York. A lovely Jewish lady helped them find their way to the train. They didn't know how to get to Florida, and she was very gracious and helped them find their way to the station. They got on the train and ended up in Sanford. And the telegram telling my grandfather they were coming was on the train, okay? They arranged, someone did, for them to come to Slavia on a wagon. So they actually beat the train and beat the telegram. So they ended up here in 1912, and they got out of the wagon, and my grandfather thought he died and gone to heaven because he was so surprised that they'd made it here. So my grandmother thought this would be the land of milk and honey, and it was not when they came.
A lot of hard work.
It really was. The original church that sits in the cemetery, again, that's where it started and kind of moved around and it's back there, was a turpentine shack. They used to, there was a lumber yard, and that was abandoned, and those were the shacks that were there. And then they did the turpentine, and that died, and that group left. So that's the houses they lived in, that big. And they used to, mosquitoes would get so bad that they would light oil rags and let them smoke, because that would help control that. So in 1912, they came, she came, and my grandfather was down here, and he had originally gone to Cleveland, to Trinity Lutheran Church. That area of Cleveland, there was other Slovaks. I think he had a brother-in-law or cousin that were there, and together some of these Slovaks got together and got help from the pastor and some of the, I think there was a lawyer or 2 involved, and they wanted to come to America. All of them were interested in farming. They wanted to own their own land because you couldn't own that in Europe. It belonged to the royalty usually. And they wanted to be Lutherans. They wanted their own religion. And you could be Lutheran there, but your church was outside of the town. It was very difficult because it was predominantly Catholic at the time. And there were lots of rules and regulations. So he made it to America. They formed in Cleveland that colony. They called it the Slavia colony. And they looked at property in California, in Texas, and in Florida, and decided on Florida. And they pulled their money, and the legalese helped them financially and legally, and formed all the documents. And there were about 6 families that came originally, and they all had about 40 acres of property, and that's what they started with.
And when they started with what product did they?
Basically, they grew what they needed to survive, okay? in the early, well, let's see, the late 1900s, prior to 1920, some of them realized they were not financially equipped to eke out a living. So my grandfather and his family, and my other grandfather, as it's worked out, and some of his family went back to Cleveland, and they got jobs, and the boys worked that were old enough. And my father, that's the only schooling he ever had, was when they were back in Cleveland. And he was,
life, though.
there you go. He was the youngest, so he couldn't work, but, so he went to school. And they were there and came back in the 20s.
I thought I had seen that they left and came back.
They did, they managed to keep the land, managed to make enough money where they could pay off some of the mortgages, et cetera. And then my Uncle John, the oldest in the family, got married. And my grandfather was going to give him his inheritance, part of the property. And that's when they all decided, you know, we could do a whole lot more together than if we all went our separate ways. And that's kind of where the business started. And they managed in the 30s, I think it was, a boxcar salary to Atlanta that gave them enough money, kind of started them off.
You have to start somewhere.
Exactly. Dad said he used to ride around and watch what the other farmers in the area were doing, because they didn't know anything about what they were
from
growing.
Europe, right?
Exactly. And he talked about how gracious they were and how much the Lees were some of the people that Grandpa Lee, how's that, the best way to refer to him, was there, and they talked and visited and helped each other out, and they all got started.
I heard one time that the property where the Oviedo Mall is, was that like a celery field or an airfield at one point?
Well, the property we're on right now, from the edge of our house, edge of our property, what direction is that? South. Was the original 40 acres on both sides of the road. This is where it all started. And then they bought land, didn't go away, so they bought land and they produced crops. And I want to say that then I don't know in what order, but where the office sits today is some of the early ground. That was where the first office ever was for the business. And we did own the land that the hospital was on, that they sold to us kids when all of us were looking for places to live. And all of the property that the mall was on was Duda's. And there was an airfield there at one time, because we owned property and land across South Florida. And it got to the point where trying to see what was going on and knowing your business was a 3-hour drive if you were lucky. And my dad was in charge. Dad was the farmer, Uncle Andy was the businessman, and Uncle John was the mechanical engineer that built all kinds of things. We have patents to this day on some of the things he invented. So so Dad was gone all the time.
So who was the pilot?
Well, which one, over time. So they decided that having a way to get around the country, the state, that got people what they needed, where they needed to go, when they needed to go, and got them home where they could still be with family, which was an important part of our lives always. So they got a plane, and they just had a little airstrip out there, a little, one time the pilot they hired came in a little, they would buzz, and either George Jacobson or his brother would go, Bo Jacobson, would go out and turn the lights on, and they would know they were coming in, and they would land. One time they got a little low and got a little barbed wire in the wheels, and so that made it them able to do their work, get it done, know what was going on, be with their people, and then be home. So yes, at one time there was an airstrip out there.
Interesting little piece of information. So Slavia was created by these families.
Correct. Never
is-
incorporated.
So it's never incorporated. Has Oviedo like engulfed it, or how is
Well,
it now?
somewhere along the line, well, Slavia post office was always Oviedo. You know, we were Rural Route 1
Mm-hmm,
when I was a kid,
mm-hmm.
box 95, I can
Right.
still remember it, out over here on Mickler Road,
Okay.
all right? But we were always Oviedo address. And my husband and I were talking about it, it was in the 80s that we moved back, so it must have been the early 90s. The corporation decided maybe incorporating into the city limits of Oviedo would be a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when the office area became part of Oviedo. And there are parts of Slavia still that are Seminole County. Where we are right here is Seminole County, it's not Oviedo. Address is, but technically we're in the county.
So if you have an emergency, you call Seminole County now.
Yes,
Yes.
so it's kind of, and yet we have, well, I believe we have these reciprocal
Yes.
um,
Whoever's closest
arrangement.
and available.
There you go,
Right.
all the way around,
Right.
so.
So, skipping forward a few years, did you attend Oviedo High School?
I did.
You did.
I was at St. Luke's
Mm-hmm.
from kindergarten to the 9th grade at that time.
Okay.
For a few years, we had a 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you got finished at St. Luke's, you went to Oviedo High School.
Mm-hmm.
So I graduated with my husband in 1988 from, we were the last class to graduate out of the original Oviedo High, well, yes, the original Oviedo High School was a brick structure that was part of what they kept where Lawton Elementary is now.
Mhm.
That was where it was. And that's where you went to high school
Mhm.
with the 1st through 12th grade, all on one campus.
Yeah.
And there were 33 kids in our class. And that's where I met my husband. And he went off to college and I went first class at UCF when it had just opened.
Wow. Was it UCF or Florida Tech?
It was at TU
Okay.
at the time. And it's such a huge campus, had 2 buildings there at the time. And I had to take PE that year, first year, and it was golf. Because we could hit the ball from here to Kingdom Come because there was nothing anywhere. So it
Both
was,
of my kids are UCF grads, and they tried all 4 of their years to get into golf, and they never could get into golf, so.
well, that's all we had back then, so it was relatively simple.
Nice.
But, so there were 33, we had integration came along. When I was there in the 10th grade, it had already happened. It was never an issue in our class. It was never, nobody noticed anybody's color. Didn't make any difference. So it was lovely.
Yeah.
So the class after that started at the new location where Oviedo High School sits now.
Okay, so you were the last one.
The last class.
Wow, so do you go back to the Lawton property and look around and
I
say?
do, and
Wow.
actually it was our lunchroom cafetorium at the time.
Cafetorium.
They called it, because that was the closest thing to auditorium we had, and that's where we graduated from. The building is still there. I think it's still part of I haven't been in it, part of the lunchroom system, but that building is still there. That was one of the original pieces, I think. And gym was the Quonset hut that we played basketball in, so.
So help me out, because I've lived in the Oviedo area for 25 years, but
Mhm.
before that, I'm not very familiar. That property that Lawton is on now, was that just like a field? or-
I can't,
you know?
it was, in my time, it was always school.
Okay,
The high school was there and the elementary schools were there. The library was in a portable,
okay.
and my Aunt Virginia Mickler was the librarian. And, my Uncle Paul Mickler was one of the teachers, you know,
That's what you do in the
that's what you
community.
did. So,
Yes.
as far as I know, and in my time, it was always school property.
Okay.
And it's expanded over the years because of the size of our area, which is
It's
amazing.
huge. Yes.
But I don't really feel a change in what was Oviedo and the uniqueness of its size. We moved back in '88, and Redbug was not realigned yet, and Mitchell Hammock from 1988 was still a dirt road, and it was paved in '89, and it kind of took 25 years for Disney, in my recollection, for it to really impact all of this part of,
This far away.
Yes.
Yes.
because you left 436, driving 426, you didn't hit a stoplight until downtown Oviedo.
My husband grew up, or he went to high school in the '80s up in Lake Mary.
Oh,
And he says driving to UCF, it was like a 2-lane road.
Yes.
And if you broke down, you didn't dare go onto someone's yard and ask for help. And he goes, now you can't even drive that way without running into so many people.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
yeah. Okay, so speaking about schools, let's talk about St. Luke's Lutheran School. And the
Okay.
church has been here for a lot of time. When did the school?
Actually, the school started when Pastor Tui was our original pastor. He came in the mid-30s, I think.
Okay.
They went like 20 years with just a visiting pastor here. And along the line, somewhere, I have to look the exact date up, but he started like a nursery school. He would pick up the kids in the area. My oldest brother, who was 10 years older than me, was in that group. And he had a couple of daughters that were in that group, and a few other children, and he had nursery school with them. And my sister-in-law was telling me that her mom said that there was a time that he would take them into the drugstore in Oviedo, and they'd all have milkshakes or something like that, you know,
Wow.
they'd treat them, he'd do that sort of thing with them. And, so technically, the school started in 1949, but we actually had things like that going on from even way back then. Pastor Tui was really interesting, he was an entrepreneurial type person anyway, it seems. And there was the original church was part of that, was used as a school building. My brother went, I've got pictures of him in elementary school at St. Luke's in the early 1949, 50s. And, so from then on, there was always that outreach that the church felt from the beginning that, it's great to have Sunday school, but what if we had religion, we could teach our kids every day of the week but Saturday. And that was the big push to have a school. And it started in 1949 and still going.
So it started in the church, and then the building that the preschool is in now, was that the original?
That was the original school. I have a picture that actually Judy Duda gave to me when she was writing some of the history that she did, along with some other collaborators, that showed how it started, because there was the auditorium, office, and one wing. Then they added a second wing to that original structure. And when I came in as principal, the office that I used that had been turned into an office had originally been my kindergarten. And I said, I didn't go very far, it kind of went full circle.
That's great, I didn't know that.
So, that, and, you know, we were blessed, we had lots of people wanting to be in our school, wanted to be part of it. We were, discussed and decided that, you know, we could have 3 of every class. Why don't we consider, you know, building a building that would house that? And we originally built the structure that we have, the new school, as it's still referred to, with 1 preschool classroom that turned into what now is, the original school building is all preschool, and there's about 800 students preschool through 8th grade.
So my question, I've heard rumor, I just wanna confirm it. People often ask why the school was placed behind the church. Was there a specific
We
reason?
purposely did that because the shooting that had gone on out west, I guess that's, where it was at the time, kind of made us consider, maybe we ought to tuck it into the back. There was land to do it, and maybe it would be safer for our children not to be on the highway anyway. Let's move it back there, so that's why we put it where we did.
Thank you for confirming that. I had heard that, but I wanted to make sure for the record.
That's
a question I get asked often.
that was one of the biggest considerations for putting it where we did.
And it looks great there, it works great, you have more
Actually, it
room for
does.
car line and all that.
Absolutely.
So, all right, so the last question I have for you is, what do you feel is your greatest accomplishment, or what are you the most proud of creating in this Oviedo area?
Uh.
I know, it's hard to narrow it down to one.
Well,
but-
no, I wouldn't say that. God blessed me. He put me in places I would never have gone, never would have even considered. But he kind of laid it in front of me, and you prayed about it and decided, well, I never would have said I'd been principal at the school I went to, not here. And I was so graciously accepted by the people that were involved in the school, that had been involved in the school a long time. You know, I was surrounded by people who were dedicated to the mission of what went on at the school, and believed in the same thing that I did as to why we had it. And if we could make more little Christians, and if you start when they're 4 or 5 or 2 or 3, that it sticks. I was blessed to have kids that I went to school with, okay, as adults bringing their children to the school. And I'm thinking, I would never have said that so-and-so would have done that.
What a great legacy, though.
And that, I think, that I am most proud of is that I was able to keep the school moving forward, and had enough sense to get out of the way when I felt like others could do more than what I was
Different
doing.
ideas and different.
Exactly. So, I guess that's what I'm most proud of.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your time today. Is there anything you'd like to have on record, that we didn't touch on, that, you know, maybe your great-great-great-granddaughter might hear someday?
Well, I've been able to go back to Slovakia. We have a cousin that's, well, we have many, as we found out over time, but that we keep in touch with. And he found a little more information about the family, some of the church records and that sort of thing. So we know a little bit more about where we came from and so forth. But my parents never wanted to go back. This was America. It was the American dream. It
You're
really was.
American, you're not, I mean, yes,
Correct.
your heritage
We
is
have
there.
We have our Slovak traditions to this day. We have Christmas Eve is Slovak food and American food now, because some of us would just as soon have the American food. But we've carried on those traditions, and I think that's important.
Very important.
If you don't, and it was extremely important to my parents. They spoke Slovak with my siblings. I was number 4 in line, and the first 3 learned Slovak from my parents. They only spoke it. But then they thought, these kids are gonna go to school. They need to know English. They need to know the language of this country. And that's what they taught us from there on out. And I think that's an important part of keep your heritage. I love that part of me, but I'm an American.
Do you know any Slovak?
A little bit. I know a few prayers
Good.
and a couple of songs, and my boy cousins taught me some of the bad
Of
words.
course.
But, yeah,
Well,
some of
good.
them
Well,
still.
thank you again, let me stop.
Well, you're welcome. I'm humbled that you even were